Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Keller, your host. And the chaplain is in this hour. If you've got a question for a chaplain, a question of a pastoral nature, maybe something about your prayer life, family life, your relationship to the church and the sacraments, all those things that chaplains might answer, this is your hour. 888-318-7884 is the number. Also, it works this way, 888-31-TRUTH. Our chaplain here at Catholic Answers is Father Hugh Barbour, and for this hour, he is your chaplain. Father is a Norbertine priest, former prior of St. Michael's Abbey in Orange County, and a doctor of the church. Is that right? Doctor of the church?
No, I have a doctorate.
Oh, you have a doctorate. That's different than being a doctor of the church.
Definitely, it's different. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
First of all, that's a posthumous honor, so I'm.
Oh, yeah, and you are not posthumous. You are humus.
I'm still alive.
You're still humus.
Still alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
As my name implies. Yeah.
Right. And that you know what that puts me in the mind of though? A guy by the name of, I don't know if you'll know him. His name is John Henry Newman.
Yes,
he
of course.
He is going to be a saint.
Yes.
Of the Catholic Church. What do you think? You think he'll be a doctor of the church too?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me, but that's a further process.
Yeah, but he's pretty good though.
Yeah, that's a title conferred, after someone's canonized or recognized, and then they have a process. But it's also done in a similar way. They combine the works and work an argument and so on and so forth. They did it with Teresa of Avila, for example. And others. I mean, the more recent cases, there's an actual
kind of process that's
dossier.
Right. All right. Well, let me ask you this: as a man who was, as a boy, raised as an Anglican, father's an Anglican priest. Mm-hmm. Now you're a Catholic priest. Mm-hmm. Do you feel any special kinship to John Henry Newman?
Oh, sure. Well, I think any Catholic in the English-speaking world should have that, because among Catholic writers who wrote in English, he certainly is at the absolute top. I mean, we don't have that many Catholic writers in English, but his writing is incomparable. Yeah. And it covers so many things and so magnificent that anyone would benefit from reading him and studying him. Although he writes in a style which is not, let's say, it's not accessible. No, I would not say it's not accessible. It's accessible, but he writes in a style.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I apologize. I got it backwards.
No. It's accessible.
It's overly accessible.
But it's not at all in the sort of pop religion style that people like nowadays. It's not like easily marketing.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You have to dig down into it, because he really does write like a father of the church.
Yeah.
He doesn't write like a Catholic motivational speaker, which there's a place for that too, but he's not one of those.
No, right. No. You made me read one of his poems. You didn't make me, but you talked about it, and then I Gerontius.
Dream of Gerontius, yeah.
Dream of Gerontius. Yeah. I'm still not over it. I read it like a month and a half ago. I'm still not over it. Still
incomparably beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a little bit difficult. But there's a lot of people that want to talk to the chaplain, so maybe we should stop talking about your Cardinal John Henry Newman.
Blessed John Henry Newman, yeah.
Blessed John Henry Newman. Soon to be Saint John Henry Newman. Let's go to Ricky in Arizona. Ricky's watching on YouTube. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Ricky.
YouTube. Ricky, your question.
Yes. Hi, Cy. Hi, Father Hugh.
Hi, Ricky.
Hey there.
And I want to say hi to everybody. Nathaniel, Mouse Pal, Pat. And I have a question about indulgences.
Okay. Do we know those people that you just said hi to, or are they?
No, they're friends out there in
that was a shout out.
That's like the little children's show.
Yes,
before,
sir.
where you say hello to everybody.
All my friends out there. There's plenty more.
Okay, good. Good. It was a romper room.
You remember romper room where they're looking in the little mirror?
I was always waiting for him to say hello, Cy, but she never said hello, Cy.
Yeah.
I guess it's not. Sorry, we're reflecting on 1960s TV.
Okay, so my question is, I'm going to get the book of indulgences, manual of indulgences, and I'm looking, there's so many. A plenary indulgence and a partial indulgence. Does that pertain to each sin, or does it pertain to the totality of sins within a lifetime? My second
Sure.
part of my question is, I'm thinking about making some type of calendar that I can post some of the very important dates, the important dates where I can apply these indulgences, and would that be a good idea?
Well, sure. Actually, strictly speaking, indulgences are not related to sin, but rather to the temporal punishment due to sin. That is, the guilt of sin is remitted by the sacrament of penance, or even by just acts of love, or, especially if it's venial sin. But the sin is remitted, but then sometimes there is a residual temporal punishment, we call it, a further purification to be undergone because of the effects of the sin in your life, or some debt to divine justice. So, for example, if someone murdered someone, they could go to confession to be absolved, but they might have, some serious time to work in purgatory. Or say someone confesses a fault that they don't overcome very well, and it's very deeply rooted in them, and they keep struggling against it, but it never entirely dissipates. Well, then you need further purification. So indulgences regard the temporal punishment due to sin. So they take away the intensity or the duration of purgatory based upon the sins we've committed, and so they vary very much from person to person. We can't know exactly how God deals with individuals, but partial just means that some part of your temporal punishment due to your sins globally is remitted by that action, or the work of mercy, or that prayer, or that penance. And the way the Church understands it now is that the Church intervenes through her charity, through the abundance of merits of Christ and Our Lady and the saints, and gives, you might say, might double the intensity or the value of your action by her direct intervention. So we don't use the terminology of days and years and all of that we used to do. And then with the plenary indulgence, that means that if it were done with the proper intention and full intense charity, that it would remit all of the penalty due to sin. Okay?
How's that?
So it's actually just regarding the time in purgatory, you might say. Not exactly time, but duration and intensity.
That's excellent.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do more indulgences.
Well, it's a very holy practice, and it increases charity. And the church's practice after the council is very, very practical, because there are 4 general concessions of indulgences that you don't even have to look things up in a book. That is, any prayer said throughout the course of one's daily work, whatever it is, mentally or vocally, any willing penance, giving up something that's legitimate with a spirit of penance, that has an indulgence. And any work of mercy performed in the spirit of penance. And then finally, John Paul II added any act of public witness to the faith. For example, like if you say grace in a restaurant, and you openly say, make the sign of the cross, and or some way in which you witness to the faith. So those are automatic, and you don't have to look up and see, is this an indulgence act or not. In the manual of indulgences, it gives basically what are the most important classic Catholic acts of devotion, and they're underlined there just because they're very important. But then, in a certain sense, they're already included in those general grants. And so it's also a good document to use to show you what the devotions are that are of particular importance in the Church's mind. And as far as the calendar, sure, I mean, because they're the indulgences of St. Francis the Porciuncula on August 2nd, and then depending upon other things, there are others as well. Okay? Thanks.
Okay, Ricky?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Father Hugh Barbour is our guest this hour. Father is chaplain here at Catholic Answers, and highly qualified in that regard. There's virtually no one here who commits sins anymore now that you're the chaplain. That's how well qualified you are.
This is pretty good. I didn't know that.
You didn't know?
No.
You've almost become a sinless apostolate.
No, never could. Thanks be to God.
Amen.
That's amazing, because the chaplain's not sinless, so I don't know how it works.
Oh, well, all right. Well,
God is good.
Maybe I overestimated
Sometimes
things.
the effect is greater than the cause,
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess so.
Not really.
Hey, we want you to share, there's lots of parishes. Actually, I was in a parish this weekend, and the person said, hey, do you have any books that we could give to people who come on Easter Sunday? And I said, what about Why We're Catholic? Trent Horn's fantastic
Yeah, it's
book.
a very good book, yeah.
And you can get a deal on it. You can buy it, a case of 20 for $3 a copy. So if you want to have some to just give out this Lent, maybe to have on hand for all the folks who will come at Easter, just go to shop.catholic.com and you can get your bulk orders of Why We're Catholic. And it'll get to you in time. Shop.catholic.com, $3 a copy, 20 copies or more of Why We're Catholic.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live is proudly supported by CatholicChemistry.com, a new dating site for Catholics who want to do dating right and believe relationships start with Catholic chemistry. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicChemistry.com for their generous support on the web at CatholicChemistry.com.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com. EWTN, communicating the faith.
Fallen away Catholic years and years ago, doing my own thing, and my mom and dad never gave up on me, and I know it was the Holy Rosary, and they kept after me. Philip, pray your Rosary, and eventually I did. I'm a member of the Knights of the Immaculata, Maximilian Kolbe's group. I'm with the Legion of Mary, and I haven't stopped leading the Rosary in nursing homes, thanks be to God.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. And it is a really, really good day here at Catholic Answers Live. Elizabeth Lev will be here second hour. We're going to talk about her brand new book, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith. It's all about counter-Reformation art.
Very good. That's an excellent topic.
And she's great, too. So
it's related to any questions we might receive.
Yeah, amen. Also, another thought that I had that I didn't mention right from the top, it is officially Lent right now. So if maybe you got a question about the Catholic practices during Lent, or something that you want to endeavor to do during Lent, or maybe you got no idea what to do for Lent, a chaplain is helpful for that as well. So 888-318-7884. Any question that a chaplain might answer is welcome. 888-31-TRUTH. Let's go to David in Yorba Linda, California, also watching on YouTube. David, your question for Father.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Happy to.
Sure.
At this point in my life, I've come to be very heavily addicted to pornography, impure images, and everything that tends to come with that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I was wondering, outside of consulting with other people who can help me with this issue, if there was any particular devotion to a member of our heavenly family that could be of any help.
Well, sure. I would say that you might think, for example, of there are some saints in the church who were actually artists who depicted the human form to edify people. And so, like, there's you've heard of the painter Fra Angelico, he painted beautiful images of our Lord and Our Lady. It's called Blessed Angelico. You could pray to him because he depicted very beautiful images, the Savior that can replace in our imagination the impure images that we've been dwelling on. There's also another one, Saint Andrew Rublev, a Russian saint, iconographer, wrote famous icons of the Trinity and of Our Lady. And so you could pray to those saints, or even anyone in general in heaven who paid attention to or depicted the human form with the right spirit. Or even a better one would be, I would say, just coming to mind right now, is to pray to St. Luke, the evangelist. But St. Luke was an artist who painted images of Our Lady, very famous ones that are venerated throughout the world. And he also wrote the Gospel. And so just the idea of having a pure eye, of being able to behold beauty without it dragging us down to sins against purity, but rather to lift our souls up to gratitude that God has taken upon himself human flesh, that had a mother who had, all the constituents of human nature, and that we could, actually venerate them and pray to them to get help for these things. And you could even Google those names, and you'd find all kinds of lovely images on the internet that aren't pornographic.
Is that helpful to you, David?
That is extremely helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, well, God bless you. I'll pray for you, okay? You're not alone.
Thank you.
Sure.
Lord knows. And David, or anybody else who's listening, if you want to those names, Fra Angelico or Andrew Rublev, or the others that Father mentioned, Nick will put them in the show notes.
Yes,
so there's always show notes that go with. I wrote it down for you, Nick. I typed it in. Nick looked like
It's
I don't know
Rublev,
who.
though. The first E needs to go there.
Rublev.
Rublev, yeah. You don't
I
have
spelled it with
you don't need both E's, just the
Rublev.
Just
That's how I spelled it.
Yeah, so
Rublev.
you can get rid of the first E there.
Are you saying I'm a bad speller in Russian?
No.
Man, I'm a bad speller in English. I'll just let you know right now. We don't have to go to Russian. 888-318-7884, the number. The chaplain is in this hour on Catholic Answers. Somebody on Facebook, I'll just paraphrase for you, Father. A Protestant preacher saying that Ash Wednesday is a pagan thing. I just want you to.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where he would get that. It certainly is not a custom that comes from pagan religious practice. It comes from Old Testament practice of putting on sackcloth and ashes as a penance, and that's referred to numerous times by the prophets themselves in the Old Testament. And also calling a fast and periods of penance and some sort of external expression of it. That's why our Lord exhorts us to be careful about not trying to appear too miserable during fast periods. But
right.
It definitely is something you find in the Old Testament. And what it was, it comes from the early church, not from paganism, to deal with Christians who fell grievously after their conversion, Christians who fell into sins of adultery or whatever, and needed to do public penance for the sake of the community. And it was kind of like a second preparation for their absolution, like their first preparation for baptism. And I know that this is not a customary idea with the once saved, always saved Protestants, but the ancient church demonstrably had this period of penance for Christians who had fallen into grave sin after their conversion, and that's what Lent came to be. So, and it's Old Testament. It's not pagan. And
you may not know this, but we have a very fine clergyman guest on this Saturday's TV show on EWTN, and we're going to talk about the history of Lent. So if you haven't caught the Catholic Answers TV show, you can catch it Saturday. Why are you laughing? Because I said a very fine clergyman, and you know that it's you?
Well, I figured it out right when you were saying it. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's go to Diane in Houston, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio Network. Diane, your question for our chaplain, Father Hugh Barbour.
Yes, hello.
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 Okay, I'm calling to see if there's a company that does gene editing, like your DNA.
Yeah.
And they can go in and correct something that might be a really bad disease in a person, and they can correct that with gene editing. I'm just looking at it from an investment standpoint. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think that an investment in that would be good, but I don't want to invest in it if I think it's going to be abused. So how does one make a determination on that?
Well, I'm not an expert on this, but what I can tell you right off the bat is that if the gene editing involves the production of fertilized ova, like that is production of humans, with then
embryonic
humans, then it's unethical because you have to produce a whole bunch in order to do these things. But I know that some gene editing is not with this what is it called now? It's called CRISPR, right? That there are other uses of it that don't involve that kind of activity. So,
right.
And it seems, right now they're very careful about it because they're worried about sort of like Frankenstein scenarios where you've got something that
it seems
goes
inevitable
wrong.
At this
right.
moment.
But if they're able to fix, there's nothing wrong. If you can go into your, open up your torso and go in and work on a big organ, well, there's no difference between that morally and working on a tiny, infinitesimally tiny organ, that deals with your DNA.
Right. Right.
So it's not immoral in itself, but I would just say you'd want if you invest in such a company, you want to make sure that you're not investing in a company that makes use of human embryos.
Yes, yes, I would never do that.
You know,
Okay.
and I don't know if there are sort of such things. There is a very fine Catholic entity in Philadelphia. I'm trying to remember the name of it right now.
Oh, the National Catholic Bioethics Center?
Yes, exactly. There you go. They have a website, National Catholic Bioethics Center, and they have a website, and you can actually type in questions, and they will get back to you. And they're very precise and super Catholic. So I would recommend that you find them as well.
And they stay up on all these technologies and companies, Diane.
Because things are changing quickly. Yeah.
ncbcenter.org. Am I right? Does that sound right? And Nick knows these things. ncbcenter.org.
Right. Okay, good.
Diane.
Yeah.
And didn't I think some adult stem cells, which with some of that CRISPR manipulation, were just used to cure a man of AIDS or HIV infection?
Yeah. There's a case where they actually proclaimed that he was cured. Yeah.
Right, and I am not certain of this, but I believe the stem cells used in that were adult stem cells. So in that case, I think people get confused because they hear stem cell. But there are plenty of stem cells that are not embryonic stem cells.
Yeah, they're still in your body everywhere.
Yeah. You don't want mine, I could tell you that right now. So if the chaplain is in, Father Hugh Barbour is our chaplain. We go now to Sue in Indiana, listening on 106.3 FM. Sue, your question for our chaplain.
Yes, I have a question. If you're married in the Catholic Church and then you get divorced, and then you get back with your spouse, and you get married at like the courthouse. Can you receive communion? Are you still considered to be married to that person, or do you have to get remarried in the church?
Well, no. The original marriage in the church is sufficient, unless the previous marriage was regarded as invalid by an annulment, in which case they probably wouldn't even be right. In that case, also there wouldn't be a renewal of the ceremony. There would just be some kind of juridical, accounting that the person that they're consenting to marry. No, but you would need to get civil marriage if you were really divorced, because you need the civil effects of your marriage. So no, there's no problem whatsoever. In fact, that's a happy scenario. If people get divorced and go back together again, that's wonderful. That's the way it's supposed to happen. That the church allows separations and divorces, but with the hope that they'll get back together again, So.
Okay, Sue?
And you don't. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
you're welcome. God bless you. Sure.
Very good. That's a good one. Getting back together. A reunion of a marriage. That's always a good. Don in Quincy, Illinois, listening on the Coventry Network. You are up next. Your question for our chaplain, Father Hugh Barbour.
Hi, we had a big conversation at work today about whether if you give up chocolate or soda, whatever, if you can have those things on Sunday during Lent. I was always told no. This other lady was always told, oh, yes, that's your cheat day. So.
Well, it's not a cheat day. That's
that's what they use for dieting. They call it cheat day.
Every day is a cheat day for
actually,
me,
in the most classical tradition of the church, the things you give up for Lent, you give up for the entire period, with some slight exceptions. And you see this in the modern Eastern churches. For example, they give up they give up milk, animal products and meat. And they give them up for the entire period of Lent, even Sundays. But in the current discipline of the Latin Rite Church, the Roman Church, there isn't any strict requirement. That is, it's basically up to you. But I would say the most classic tradition is when you give something up for Lent, you give it up for all of Lent, period. And what you do on Sunday is you allow yourself you can eat a little more, you don't have to fast on Sunday, but you would still abstain for the things that you've given up. Exception being, maybe St. Joseph's Day, which falls during Lent, that's a big feast day, or the Feast of Annunciation, or it's your name day or your birthday, something like that. But yeah, I would say generally speaking, when you give something for Lent, you should just give it up until Easter.
That's what I thought too. Thank you.
Yeah, God bless.
I will do whatever you say, Father.
You're free to do whatever you want, because there is no law of the church about this.
I'm just saying I was raised in the Sunday
off thing. Yeah, well, it's fine. It's not like, I'm just saying, if you want to go by what was traditional, fine. But I mean, there's no law.
If I got to choose between you and my mother, who should I choose? Father?
Open your mouth and let her put a big piece of chocolate in it. Whatever Mommy wants you to have, you can have.
888.
Does she live nearby, though?
She does, yeah. We live a few miles apart.
Oh, good. Well, that's good, because then you don't have to worry about it. She'll be able to resolve the difficulty for you.
Yeah, I could just go right over there on Sunday and say, Father, you said I can't. And she'll say, go ahead and have that. But I don't give up chocolate for Lent.
No, but it's not a strict rule anyway.
Yeah. But right. Okay, all right. Well, I'll let it go there. 888-318-7884, the number. Father Hugh Barbour is our chaplain. He is a Norbertine priest and a licentiate and doctorate in things like philosophy and theology. Am I getting that about right?
Yeah, pretty good.
He gave me the look. But yeah, okay, we're in the ballpark.
I'm not particularly concerned to have
your credentials touted?
Yes.
All right, well, he doesn't want his credentials touted.
I'm just a simple Bible Christian.
Given today's gospel, but you can call him.
Catholic Answers Live.
Is the church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Author Mark McNeil spent years in the Oneness Pentecostal movement, praying in its lively services, zealously spreading its unconventional teachings, and rejecting mainstream Christianity as misguided. Then he left it all behind. All in the Name is the story of a man who believed he was among an elite group of believers who followed the true faith when so many others had strayed. But an inquisitive mind, careful study, and the action of the Holy Spirit finally led Mark out of Oneness Pentecostalism and into the Catholic Church. This is an inspiring conversion story you won't want to miss. It's a faith strengthener for Catholics and an intriguing challenge to those who deny the doctrine of the Trinity. Order your copy of All in the Name today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Have you ever sown seeds of discord in your life?
We're discussing the impacts on tomorrow's Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. The chaplain is in this hour. If you have a question for a chaplain, as we begin the Lenten journey today, give us a call, 888-318-7884. We go now to John in San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. John, your question for Father Hugh Barbour.
Hello,
yes,
John.
I heard on the show the other day that sin could be defined as anything that's contrary to God's nature. This definition really resonates with me. I get it. I understand it. And I've been contemplating that if this is correct, then anything that man has made with his hands would be sinful.
No, that wouldn't exactly be right, because God created man by God's own intention, created man in his image and likeness to be rational and free, and so created him as capable of making things, of producing things, of practicing the arts and different professions. And so when a man does that, he's actually acting in accordance with God's intention, which of course is his nature. So now, of course, if it's something created only by man in a way contrary to God's will, like the Tower of Babel, that's kind of like the original example in Scripture, well then of course it's sinful. But man's actual creating things or making things in accordance with the reason and freedom that are given him by God, that aren't sinful, well, those things are perfectly fine, because that's God's intention, is nature.
Does that help you, John?
No, it doesn't. So, like a car, man's created a vehicle, that's God's nature?
Well, God made man in his image, and he made man to be reasonable, intelligent, and free. And so man can discover, by scientific discovery, by practice of arts. I mean, all the things that we do. We cook, we weave textiles, we farm, we raise animals. I mean, all the ancient arts, they're not things we know how to do automatically. They're things that human beings discover with their intelligence. And God gave us those things in order for us to be able to accomplish the things that he wants. So, yeah, I mean, basically human art, human skill, and craft and whatnot is in accordance with God's will. Sure, absolutely. Otherwise, what would we do? We'd have to sit down and just do nothing, because everything human has to do with some kind of human activity that uses the nature given by God.
So why then are we called to abandon the world?
Well, that's
the way of the world.
Well, that's of course the world understood in the biblical sense, like in St. John's Gospel, as that fallen creation that rejects God or does not follow his commands. So that's like the world of flesh and the devil. That's that kind of world. Well, that we are meant to reject. But then in rejecting that, we actually act in accordance with the nature God gave us, which is to be rational and free, and to mirror God's goodness and his power and his happiness by our own activity, which is what he gave us to do. Just like with Adam and Eve, he said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. And he gave them the Garden of Eden and said that they should tend the garden, so that the practice of certain arts are already in God's original intention for human nature.
John, thank you very, very much. I will remind you, John, we do open forum here every Tuesday and Thursday, so if you have follow-ups, go ahead and call. We'd love to have another talk with you.
Sure.
Jeff in Missouri, listening on Covenant Radio, is up next. Jeff, your question for the chaplain.
Yeah, thanks for all you do. My question is regarding the veneration of saints and relics. And so we have a relic, the heart of St. John of Vianney, is coming through one of our local churches next week. I've never been to a celebration like this, so I'm not exactly sure what I need to do to prepare. If there's something you could recommend that me read, and also, like, when I go to venerate that relic, I'm struggling with what my mindset should be. Is it celebratory? Is it more solemn? So if you could help me with that, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Sure. That's good questions. Well, I would say preparing for the veneration of the relic of St. John Vianney's heart, best way would be to inform yourself on his life, the nature of his sanctity and whatnot. Just get a short biographical treatment of St. John Vianney, or even a longer one. There's a beautiful one by a priest by the name of Trochu, Trochu. It's a beautiful biography that was written by someone that actually knew him and looked at all the. He has an amazing life. So to know him, to get to know him personally a little bit, and then as far as the veneration of the relic goes, well, we venerate the relics of the saints because they are, you might say, little places where the soul of the saint dwelt with all its gifts and graces from God, and will be reunited to them in the resurrection of the dead. And so it's a sacred object in which divine grace and power dwelt and will dwell again in the resurrection. And even now, they can be channels of divine grace. It's not a somber event. It's actually an event that indicates faith in the resurrection and the intercession of the saints. And so, and particularly in the case of St. John Vianney's heart, you might consider this. He had in a meditation on the priesthood, he said, do you know what the priest is? He says this to the people in one of his homilies. He says, the priest is the love of the heart of Jesus. So looking at his heart, you consider how he viewed his own role in life as to be mirroring and bestowing the love of the heart of Jesus.
Okay, Jeff?
Is that good?
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
All right.
God
Yeah,
bless you.
very good.
Sure. Peace.
So I take it that the St. John Vianney's heart is making a tour of the United
Right.
States.
The Knights of Columbus are sponsoring a tour of the relic of his heart around the United States. It's already been in Southern California. It was here in San Diego County, even. Yeah, right, and so that's making the rounds. It's wonderful because relics, far from being unpopular, are quite popular.
Yes.
Yeah, and and there are many examples that relics. St. Therese came around, right, and other things, and Padre Pio, and then St. Mary Magdalene's arm that came a few years ago. There are a lot of the veneration of relics is certainly something which is quite popular, and it's
very helpful.
And the church encourages this. It's not some kind of weird thing, No, like when you talk to Protestants, they think it's something weird, but it's not.
No. All right. Let's go to Joe.
Thing to do.
Joe in Cleveland, Ohio, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Thanks for downloading the app onto your phone, Joe. Your question for Father.
I am considering joining the priesthood, and I was wondering, are there any books that help you decide on what order to join and if you should do it or not? Any books that help you out with deciding if you should become a priest?
Well, I think one thing you could do is, there are books that I don't know what level of spiritual reading you do, but there's a very beautiful book by a priest by the name of Blessed Columba Marmion. It's called Christ, the Ideal of the Priest. That's a very profound book, and it discusses all the different aspects of priestly life. Christ, the Ideal of the Priest by Columba Marmion, Marmion. That's one, but that's a little, it's a little heavier. If you want something lighter, there's a book by St. Joseph Cafasso, that's Caffasso, an Italian saint, on the dignity and duties of the priesthood, or even learning about the saints who were sanctified by living the priestly life, like St. John Vianney, patron of parish priest, or Saint Philip Neri, and there are all kinds of books that describe the priestly life that they lived. And that could be helpful. And then if you wanted a church document, you could read Vatican II's decree on priestly life and ministry from the Second Vatican Council. So those are some examples. But I'd really recommend reading about the priestly life in Columba Marmion if you're up to it. It's a deep book, but it's full of edification.
And Joe, how old a guy are you?
14.
All right.
Okay. Well, and you're a good reader?
Kind
of. Okay. Yeah. Well, why don't we say the thing to do is to acquaint yourself with the lives of saints who were priests. Like if you get a short life of St. Philip Neri, that's Neri, St. Philip Neri, Neri is the last name. And there are some brief biographies that are very accessible, that don't require hours and hours and hours of work. And of course, you can go online on the internet. You can read things right there, or also St. John Vianney. That's Vianney. He's the patron saint of parish priests. And look into it there. And then the other thing is just read the Gospels and look at our Lord's relationship with his apostles and what he teaches them and how he wants them to live in the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles and the sacred scriptures.
Okay, Joe.
And pray, of course.
Okay.
And I'll pray for you.
Yeah.
Okay. God bless
Thank
you.
you.
Sure.
Will you call us back again sometime, Joe?
Yeah, I will.
All right, very
Yeah,
good.
please,
Well, God bless you in your discerning. 888-31-TRUTH is the number here. Our chaplain is Father Hugh Barbour, and he's taking questions of a chaplainy nature, not chaplain-esque. I never say chaplain-esque. Do you know why? Chaplain-esque means like Charlie Chaplin.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah, I think so. We got a free ebook right now.
I'm far too big for that.
You are big time. That is true.
No.
Oh, you mean physically?
Compared to Charlie Chaplin, yeah.
Everybody's big compared to Charlie Chaplin. We got a free ebook. I got to tell people how to get it. You go to Catholic Answers Facebook page and download your free copy of Making the Most of Lent, A Spiritual Companion. Go to Catholic Answers Facebook page and you can have that free ebook, Making the Most of Lent, A Spiritual Companion.
Got questions? Visit us today at Catholic.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
The devil will always do his best to tempt you into sin until you get to that place where you love sin. That's what he wants. He wants you down there with him. And not because he loves you, he hates you. When you do what the enemy tempts you to do, he does it out of pure hatred.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Pope Francis reminds us that it does not take a specialized degree in theology to become a great evangelist. We're all called to evangelize. Think about the woman at the well. After she encountered Jesus, she immediately went into the city and invited others to meet him as she had. You and I can go out now and do the same. And St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. Get involved today by contacting us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to The Chaplain is In this hour on Catholic Answers Live. Kimberly in San Antonio, Texas. Next, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Kimberly, your question for Father Hugh Barbour.
Hello, Kimberly.
Hi. Hi. Yes, I'm currently in RCIA.
Yay!
Well, yay. So I'm in RCIA, and I'm actually about to go to the Ash Wednesday Mass. My question is, am I allowed to get the ashes? Or, because I know it's not a sacrament from what I'm understanding, correct?
Right. It's a sacramental. It's a blessed thing that we use, but it's not one of the sacraments. Now, are you going to be baptized in RCAA?
I'm actually already baptized.
Okay, well, that's fine. Well, then you can go ahead and get the ashes. Because the ashes are for penitents who were baptized. So, like, if you've never been baptized before, it wouldn't make any sense to have the ashes. But if you are baptized, then, yeah, you can receive them.
Have you ever gotten ashes before, Kimberly, or will this be the first time?
No, this would be my first time.
Yeah, no,
go straight to the supermarket afterwards. People love it.
Yeah. Right. Show off a little bit.
Yeah, show off. A lot of people say, "Excuse me, miss, you have some. There's a little something." Kimberly, that's a delightful call. Thank you very, very much.
God bless you. Yeah, thanks.
Let us go now to Zach in Vancouver, British Columbia, which last I looked is in Canada. You are up next with Father Hugh Barbour. Zach, your question.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. It's my call is regarding apostolic succession.
Okay.
And I'm wondering how that falls in place when you have multiple people claiming to be popes or running to do so.
Okay. Well, that's actually apostolic succession, strictly speaking, refers to the passing on of the powers of the priesthood and the bishops and priests and deacons of the church by the laying on of hands and ordination. And so that's a sacramental thing. It's the reception of the sacrament of holy orders, whether as a deacon, a priest, or a bishop. And of course, a bishop is kind of, a complete priest. So, but what you're referring to is that at times there's another thing like the patrine succession, like just literally the succession of popes in the See of St. Peter, and that, of course, is a different thing than the sacramental thing, because the pope, being pope is not a sacrament. A pope is already a bishop of the church, and as a bishop, he's equal to all other bishops. But as the Bishop of Rome, he's the head of the College of Bishops. He's the head of all the bishops around the world, but he's not more a bishop than they are, because he's received ordination just like they have. So they all have apostolic succession. But then it can happen in church history that more than one bishop or candidate might claim to be the legitimate pope because there's a disagreement about the election or something like that, and that's happened. But those were in all those cases in history, the men that were had various claims on being pope, they were all bishops, so they all had apostolic succession, but it's just that they were not all legitimately meant to be successors of Peter as Bishop of Rome. So if you get the distinction I'm making. Yeah.
All right, Zach, I hope that's helpful. We got a lot of people, though. I'm going to keep moving. So John in Dallas, Texas, listening on the EWTN app. Your question for Father Hugh Barbour.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for taking my call. Father, I had a question. I was a regular prayer of the Liturgy of Hours, morning prayer, daytime prayer, and evening prayer until about a couple of months ago, and then it just sort of fell. I just sort of stopped, and I'm not quite sure why, and I'm having a really hard time getting back into it. I was doing it for about 6 or 7 years, and I don't know what the crisis is that why I can't sort of get back into it.
Well, sometimes there are various things. I mean, obviously, this is a kind of trial that you're undergoing in your spiritual life. But what I would recommend is not to push it too much. Like, don't just try to say, well, I've got to start doing exactly what I did before, but rather begin by, say, going to the church before the Blessed Sacrament, or in your room or house in front of the crucifix or an image of our Lord, and just pray quietly from your heart, and consult the Lord. Ask for a desire for prayer, and to return to your full prayer life, and just he'll help you with it, because the devil so often he gives us these sort of dry temptations. They're not really dramatic. It's just suddenly we stop doing things that we did before, and there doesn't seem to be any particular reason. Sometimes there is, but sometimes there's no particular reason. And so, we just shouldn't be discouraged by that, but we should just gently return our hearts to the thought of our Lord and the Blessed Mother, and just begin to pray again. You might want to pick up the Rosary, for example, and just pray quietly the Rosary, or read the Scriptures, or just read the Psalms without having to do the whole Divine Office. But you would want to get back to praying the Divine Office if you can, but the Liturgy of the Hours. But what you're experiencing is experienced by many people over and over again. So it's not rare, but we just need to get back on the task. And so what we need is the sweetness of prayer to attract us a little bit, and maybe that means just quieting down and not making it a task, if you know what I mean, but just as something that we're longing for, a desire.
John, how does that strike you?
Yeah, that sounds really helpful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, God bless you. I'll pray for you.
Thank you, John. Thanks very, very much. Let's go to Jim in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on 89.5 FM. Jim, your question for our chaplain, Father Hugh Barbour.
Hey, how are you, my friend? I got
Jim.
2 quick questions.
Sure.
They told me to hurry up because you were short on time, but
okay.
There was a gentleman that called earlier. I'm new to this because I've never been a church guy. I've been a lot to churches, because I dated a girl that went to church when I'm 64 now. The guy called in and said he was struggling with pornography.
Mm-hmm.
He asked for help on who to pray to. I was wondering, my first question is, why didn't you just tell him to pray to Jesus? Because I thought he died for all that.
Okay.
And my other question is, and I'm not trying to delegitimize the Catholic Church, because I believe there's good Christian people in the Catholic Church, and I'm not coming from that angle. And the other thing is the problem with the priest. Why don't you all just allow them to get married?
Okay, those are great questions, Jim. The very clear. First question, why did you advise praying to saints and not just straight to Jesus? Second question, why don't priests get married, or why don't we allow priests to get married?
Well, his specific question was, are there any saints that are particularly important for the problem of pornography? So that was my key focus there.
Yeah.
But, praying is just really talking to somebody. And, like Jim, I could ask you to pray for me, and you might respond and say, well, don't ask me to pray. Why don't you just pray to Jesus? Because, human beings can ask each other to pray for them, and our Lord wants us to do that. The Scriptures exhort us to pray for each other and to ask for each other's prayers. And so when we ask for the prayers of the saints, it's nothing against, or doesn't take anything away from our prayer to Jesus, but it's actually included in it, because he wants us to be all united in charity, doing good works for each other. And prayer for others is definitely something which our Lord wants us to do. For example, he says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. So our Lord even commands us to pray for other people. And so, and the word pray just means to ask. So, you can ask anybody for anything that's legitimate. And so Jesus wants us to ask for spiritual things from each other as well as from Him, because it all comes through Him anyway. As you rightly point out, He's the one that has saved us, right? But we're included in that, you know.
Okay.
And then
the marriage
question about the marriage. Well, that's an ancient discipline of the church that once actually, it's actually not correct. What people don't understand is that the Catholic Church has allowed, and in many places does allow, married men to become priests. But once you become a priest, if you're married, then that's your only marriage. Or once you become a priest and you're not married, you can't marry subsequently. And so it's a distinction, because the priestly office has so many requirements for the care of souls and for the worship of God that the traditional discipline, going way, way, way back, I mean, this goes back to the beginning, as St. Paul says, I would that all men were as I and didn't marry. I mean, that's in the New Testament. And so, generally speaking, the Church's discipline has been to lessen the incidence of priests being married. So married men can become priests. That's true in many places, even today. But once you're a priest already, you can't get married subsequently. You know, it's sort of moving from one thing to the other.
Jim, you said you're new to this. I wonder if those answers were satisfying to you.
Well, I wanted to say that I didn't invent the Rubik's Cube, but I'm smart enough to know that they ought to let those priests get married. The other thing is how are you ever going to know how to deal with family problems if you've never had a family?
Well, I mean, we've all been members of a family. That's for sure. I mean, we're all children of someone and brothers and sisters of someone. I think that long experience has shown that works out pretty well, especially because in traditional Christian society, families were numerous. You know, you had lots of brothers and sisters, and you had all of that. Now you have sort of these fragmented families and divorce and everything, so it's a little harder. But it's still a good point. I mean, there is a value to having some priests who have a family, and that's and they exist. You know, in fact, there are hundreds in the United States.
Right. As a matter of fact, the editor of our magazine, his father was a Catholic priest, married. I think he was one of the first.
Yeah.
Father Ryland.
Yeah.
Jim, thanks very, very much
for
the call. You're always welcome to call. I just want to, before we go to our next caller, Father, there's, I think, a misconception sometimes that the celibacy of priests is what causes sexual abuse, and there's just no evidence of that, and there's no there's no evidence that priests abuse anyone.
Quite the contrary. Most sexual abuse occurs within families anyway.
Right.
And as I said to a Baptist minister friend of mine when all these scandals came out with the Baptists in Texas, I said, if you just let your pastors marry, you wouldn't have these problems.
Let's go to the last.
That's my little joke.
The anonymous, you got to be real quick, but we want to get you an answer. So your question, please, for Father.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, breaking a civil law, for example, a speed limit. I like to drive fast. Would that be considered a sin that I would have to confess?
Okay, Father?
Okay, well, in and of itself, I'll give you the stricter position from St. Thomas and also Vatican II, which mentions, believe it or not, it mentions in one place speed limits. They mentioned everything.
Really?
Yes. That any kind of civil law which is rational, which has a rational reason that is for the common good, means that you need a weightier rational reason to disobey it. If you do, because it is true, positive civil laws that are made, they don't have to be obeyed all the time, because they're only for certain circumstances and certain situations. And so, I wouldn't say that if you roll through a stop sign, at 3 a.m. on a country road, that you're necessarily committing a grave sin. But the fact is that you need a proportionate reason that's more reasonable and urgent than the actual civil law. So the answer is, it's a slight sin.
Okay,
sorry, but
it's a worse sin though if you're in the fast lane driving slow. That's a terrible sin, Father. Can we have your blessing, please, before we go?
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et maneat semper. Amen.
Amen.
Have you been driving behind me in the fast lane?
Are you slow in the fast lane, Father?
Too slow for some people.
Yeah, then I probably have been behind you. And I probably thought sinful things about you. Elizabeth Lev will be here next to talk about how Catholic art saved the faith. Thank you very, very much, Father Barbour.
You're welcome.
We'll see you in just a couple minutes with Liz Lev.
Every question is important. Ask yours today on Catholic Answers Live.
As Catholics, we hear expressions like dogma, doctrine, deposit of faith, and, of course, magisterium. And adding to the confusion, we have the ordinary magisterium and the extraordinary magisterium. So what if you were looking for one book written for the layman that explained what all these terms mean and how they interact in the lives of the Church and her faithful? The fact is, no such book existed until now. Brand new from Catholic Answers Press is Jimmy Akin's latest book, Teaching with Authority. Teaching with Authority is not about specific church teachings, it's about church teaching itself. A unique and long overdue resource for Catholics as well as those inquiring about the faith. Teaching with Authority will help deepen your understanding of what the church teaches by showing you how, why, and where she does. Get your copy of Teaching with Authority today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging onto the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Sharing the gospel with family and friends can be challenging. It's especially hard when they won't even hear you out because of all the mental roadblocks they've built up. This is Carlo Broussard, and in my new book, Prepare the Way, my aim is to help you tackle that essential first step to apologetics and evangelization, getting people to listen with an open mind. Even our best witness can bounce right off folks like these if we don't prepare the way first, breaking down barriers and leaving minds and souls free to encounter the truth. I'll give you evidence and arguments and step-by-step strategies based on asking the right questions to help them overcome their obstacles and make a straight path for the Lord. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture's moral center continues to fly apart, and with every form of deviance publicly aired and celebrated, we have no choice but to equip our kids to understand about such issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level, to meet the world's challenges. Silence can no longer be an option. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging on to the shop at Catholic.com.
What difference does it make who or what you worship or what you believe? Sharing the faith used to make some people mad because it challenged their own strong beliefs. Today, it makes a lot of people yawn because they don't have strong beliefs about anything. Religious indifference is the great spiritual sickness of our age, a product of the relativism that dominates modern culture. This is Matt Nelson, and in my new book, Just Whatever, I'll take down the building blocks of religious indifference one by one. We'll look at the different kinds of indifference you tend to encounter or in your friends and family members to see where they come from and why they're seductive. What you believe matters. Find out why and what to do about it in my new book, Just Whatever. You can order your copy of Just Whatever by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. And again, a blessed first day of Lent and blessings on your Lenten journey this year from all of us here at Catholic Answers. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and you've probably heard the phrase art for art's sake. It maybe is the most common slogan modern people have about art, but it wasn't always that way. There was a time when art was undertaken quite consciously for the sake of Christ and his church, following the what would we call it? The disintegration brought on by the Reformation. Catholic artists, you might recognize some of the names, Michelangelo or Bernini, but many lesser-known artists as well, were enlisted to help restore the wholeness of the church, to heal and to inspire with visions of wholeness and holiness. This hour, we reflect on their work and on the triumph of beauty and truth in Counter-Reformation art with Elizabeth Lev, whose new book, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith, is available now from Sophia Institute Press. Elizabeth Lev is an art historian, best-selling author, international speaker, and a certified sommelier. She teaches Baroque, Renaissance, and Christian art at Duquesne University in Rome. Elizabeth Lev, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us in the middle of the Roman night.
Oh, thank you.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the book. It is just a beautiful book. That's Sophia Institute Press, I think, is known for making beautiful books. I always end up commenting on it when we have one of their authors on, but this is the most beautiful book I've ever seen them produce.
I was really amazed myself when I first picked it up. I couldn't get over how heavy it is.
That's the exact same reaction I had.
And it's wonderful. They did such a wonderful job.
Yeah, I picked it up. I was like, was there a brick in here? But it's because they have these heavy, glossy pages, which is exactly what you should do if you're going to have pictures by Guido Reni and Caravaggio and all the others that you have in here. So, again, congratulations on the book. But is this claim maybe a bit overdone, that Catholic art saved the faith, or is there a special role that art plays in preserving and transmitting the faith?
I'll tell you, when this title was first being bandied about, I was a little hesitant. I'm not very rah-rah in my writing. But actually, as I was writing this book, I began to feel more and more rah-rah and more convinced that really Catholic art had a huge role in helping to preserve the faith, teach the faith, hand on the faith, and most important, it helped to resolve the controversies that were going on around the faith. So let's think about it this way. It's 1550, the printing press has been invented. And you have millions, 150 million documents being circulated around Europe by mid-1550. So people are really inundated with information.
Yeah.
The Protestants have really mastered this medium. They're really good at it, and they write these very catchy clickbait titles. You're going to want to read the stuff they're writing because it's so polemical sounding. Is it really correct that the church just starts either publishing back equally polemical titles, or worse, or more complicatedly, when you're trying to explain dogma, you have to be careful and precise, so it doesn't make kind of fun easy reading.
Right.
It doesn't do pamphlets well. But what does work is art. Art can transmit a message, catch your eye, make a statement, help you remember, remind you of things through color, line, drama, light, the way that it happened throughout the 16th and then 17th century.
So these artists, however, they're not all saintly people. So what do you make of that? These are people are truly transmitting the faith in a way that nothing else can do it, and they are not saints themselves.
Well, I think really it was, first of all, it's an all hands on deck moment.
Okay.
But also the fact is that these artists have things that they can contribute. It's an age where, despite the fact that when you study art history, the 1600s, the the 16th century, it's basically accused of having tried to strangle art, that the church just wanted to control art and tell everybody what to do and have everybody walk in lockstep. The mere fact that a man like Caravaggio with a criminal record, or even the first women to become professional painters and get hired for altarpieces in Rome, which is a man's town art-wise, if ever there was one in the 16th century, it's a sign that the church is really casting into the deep. If you have something to say, if you have an experience that you can turn into something transformative and redemptive, give it to us. Help us. And so I really think these people become these artists who are very, very troubled, like Caravaggio, who is clearly a very troubled artist. They become almost like beacons of how to kind of struggle towards faith or light in the case of Caravaggio, even though he may be still mired in darkness. I compare Caravaggio a lot to Mel Gibson in The Passion.
I was just thinking about that, about the person who's it seems in many ways to be the tormented soul. But even today, people will look at Caravaggio and feel, there's something there that draws them because it doesn't look... it looks like struggle. It looks like somebody who knows the dark and violent side of life.
He knew the dark and violent side of life. He also knew the danger of pride. I think something that I find very interesting about him is as he moves later on in life and he gets into trouble, he's killed a man, he's on the run. I think one of the things that's fascinating is his works of art begin to focus more and more on the humility of saints. So, for example, the very large altarpiece he painted for Malta, where you have the death of John the Baptist. Here he is, the man we know as John the Baptist. He's already been killed. He's lying on the ground, and now the servant is coming to remove his head, to put it on a platter. And he gets more and more interested in this problem of humility. As a matter of fact, his last painting, which is a self-portrait, it's a self-portrait of him. It's David and Goliath. And the beheaded face of Goliath, which is preferred towards the viewer by David, is the face of Caravaggio. And what's really interesting is that the sword that David is holding, it's been lost now, but we know it used to read Humiliter, which is not only the personal motto of St. Charles Borromeo, Archbishop of Milan, when Caravaggio was born, but it also means humbly. So it's interesting. A man who understood humility was the key and yet couldn't do it, and that struggle that we feel in his art.
Again, Elizabeth Lev is our guest. Her book is How Catholic Art Saved the Faith, The Triumph of Beauty and Truth in Counter-Reformation Art. If you'd like to talk with Elizabeth Lev, 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-318-7884. One of the things looking at this art, and I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying that. I don't even know if you're allowed to say this anymore. I'm struck looking at these paintings that it's better than the art we have today. Is that illegal? Are you allowed to say that? Are you allowed to?
I say it every day. So.
Oh, okay, all right. It seems so judgmental to say it, but I mean, it's if you're a normal human being, you look at this and go, "My Lord, that is just of a magnitude different than what the art is today."
It is. I think the mere fact that when you look at an exhibition like we keep talking about Caravaggio, but when Caravaggio had a monographic show 9 years ago, so only works by Caravaggio, it was one of the biggest blockbusters in history. So here we are, all going to see the work of this Italian painter who died 400 years ago in questionable circumstances, and yet it's his work that creates lines around the block, which doesn't really happen today in modern art. And certainly not in modern religious art. We really drifted away from the idea of telling stories that are understandable. I think that's a very big part of it. Every single painting in that book, in one way or another, either represents an idea that in a storytelling type fashion, a narrative fashion, or actually tells the story of something that happened in an engaging kind of way. So we've lost the capacity to tell stories in pictures.
Well, I'll throw this out to you, and then we have to take a break, and then we will go to calls. Callers, thank you very much for your calls. Just hang on, we'll get to you. 888-318-7884. But looking at this art, one gets the sense of a level of mystery that is missing in modern art. And I wonder if I'm right to say modern art is, in many ways, an intellectual exercise, and it's an exercise in critique of what came before, rather than an exercise in making something that is itself immediately beautiful.
I think there at some point we have to kind of make a distinction between modern contemporary art that's working for the market and for the secular public. I mean, there's also a huge difference in the consumer of art, right? Because the art that's produced and how Catholic art saves the faith is art that's produced for pilgrims and for people that have some sort of religious desire. Whereas today, where the money goes, where the attention goes, where the critics go, is in an art that's obviously and very overtly secular. So our problem lies more in how does the world of religious contemporary art, how do we produce religious contemporary art in a milieu where the audience has already been trained to go to a more intellectual, abstract, sentiment-oriented, sensation-driven type of art. So we find ourselves in very different circumstances. We don't call the shots anymore as the church once did. We're sort of running around behind the galleries, the superstars, the famous artists.
Well, but it's serious business, though. If you're claiming, and I do not dispute the claim in any way, that this Catholic art of the Catholic Counter-Reformation is powerful in preserving and representing the faith so that it can be whole and healed again. It strikes me that we're in a very similar time now. It's a different kind of rejection of the faith, but we're in a time of rejection, and we better get better at art.
I would say so. I think it's a fascinating topic that occupies a lot of my attention, our modern day iconoclasm. I feel like we've entered into a kind of iconoclasm which has happened in two other occasions in the church, once in the 8th century and once during the Counter-Reformation. And we've entered into a new kind of iconoclasm where there's a complete distrust of beauty and that which is actually representative, and there's also a sort of looking down on something that is easier to understand or even more engaging or pretty as opposed to sensationalistic.
Elizabeth Lev is our guest. Her book, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith, The Triumph of Beauty and Truth in Counter-Reformation Art. I tell you what, even if you can't read, I'd get this book. The pictures themselves are worth it. If you can read, I think you'll like it even more. 888-31-TRUTH is our number. We'll get to your calls for Elizabeth Lev right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Your questions, Catholic Answers Live.
Morning Glory. It's Catholic from coast to coast.
Suffering is, instead of seeing it as a participation in Christ's passion, in union with his redeeming sacrifice on the cross, we see it as, we have to avoid pain, we have to avoid suffering. People need to think that it's not about avoiding suffering that we think is meaningless. It's about finding meaning in the suffering that's unavoidable.
Morning Glory. Talking about everything important to today's Catholic. Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
St. Paul's street evangelization isn't like other evangelism you might have seen on the streets. We don't yell, and we don't force anyone to pay attention to us. Instead, St. Paul's street evangelization is committed to presenting a positive, passionately Catholic presence to a world hungry for truth. For more information, or to start a chapter of your own, go to www.streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com. It's time to do our part.
Elizabeth Lev is our guest. Beautiful new book, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith, from Sophia Institute Press. So we're talking art today. If you have questions in that vein, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Let's start with Jacqueline in Portland, Oregon, listening on the great modern day Catholic radio there. Jacqueline, your question for Elizabeth Lev.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm curious why icons are so treasured when the depiction of their people's faces are so ugly. I just don't, I can't get myself wrapped around any of them because I like to see people look like people.
So icons, okay. So those strike Jacqueline as ugly. What do you make of that?
Okay, Jacqueline, I'm gonna tell you a secret along with all the other people who are listening, I'm afraid. I'm not really a huge fan of icons. My closest friends will tell you that we have all kinds of arguments when I throw my hands in the air. But I will say that ironically, as it just so happens, I'm working on a new writing project which requires me to go and start looking at icons and take them very seriously. And I would say something that it was a little bit, it goes to what we were talking about before. Icons are very clearly mapped out. They're very easy to understand. So everything that we find, perhaps you and I find, not aesthetically pleasing, small mouth, really big eyes, really weird oval faces, long fingers. Each one of those things has a meaning. And once you can understand that meaning, it becomes a way of teaching the faith and meditating on the faith, and almost like a prayer, like a rosary prayer. And so as much as I personally don't find them very aesthetically pleasing, I'm sort of thinking about spearheading a campaign that what we need is more icons, because people don't really have a habit of prayer. They don't have a habit of understanding. Mary has big eyes because she sees everything. Her mouth is small because she doesn't say very much. Her fingers are long because she wants us to see her son. So in some ways, icons might actually be the next thing to help save the faith.
What do you think, Jacqueline?
Well, except their noses. They have trouble with noses.
It's not that I would contest the point that I don't know if they have trouble with noses, but as Elizabeth was saying, there's something else at work than mere or than realism in an icon. Is that a fair way to say it?
I think so.
All right. Jacqueline, thanks very, very much. 888-31-TRUTH, our number here. You know, something I'm thinking about while I'm looking at this art and this kind of, I think the word is sumptuous, the sumptuousness of this Counter-Reformation art. Is there any way in which artists were part of the problem with the Reformation, in that maybe they were part of the stuff that came before Martin Luther and John Calvin? I think everybody kind of knows, the Catholic Church got a little bit sensuous there. And were they part of the problem before, or am I wrong?
Yes, art actually, so let's put it this way. It's 1500, let's say 1520.
Okay.
You've had Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling. You've had Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. You have Raphael's School of Athens and the Disputation. Now what do you do? Right? You're an artist. So I'm going to make I'm going to do, what do you do next? So these artists are very, very formally trained in the wake of, these are at this point, they're super trained. They know everything about color theory. They know about line. They know their technical work. They're very, very skilled artists. But for them to just keep repeating the same three things, so they start to play with the images. They elongate them, and they try to find these different ways of showing what they know, but doing things from a more complicated angle. So also a very sophisticated art-loving public will feel gratified looking at these works. Oh, I recognize that line. It was used in Michelangelo's this, that, or the other thing.
Really?
So it becomes a kind of insider art, very much in the know. And so it becomes, as a matter of fact, a kind of art for art's sake. And as a matter of fact, fact, the most dangerous accusation that was ever leveled at Michelangelo was when he was accused of loving his art more than his subject. And I don't think that was true of Michelangelo, but you can get that sense with some of the other artists. And then following in that vein, I mean, just to draw this out a little bit further, if you're just trying to get a reaction out of people by making, you know, the leg of a figure abnormally long, or you're using colors that are basically neon and artificial, if you're trying to get a reaction out of people, what's the easiest way to get people's attention, right? What's the fastest way to make someone look twice? You start to use the sensuality. So you start to get stories. Like I often use this painting in my class because it's such a perfect example. It's a painting of Susanna and the elders, and it doesn't really look like Susanna's trying to repel the elders. I mean, she's sort of twined around the two of them. You're like, I thought I read in this story that Susanna refused the elders. I must have missed something in there. And so they really start playing very close to the wind. And here's the most interesting problem that the artists are causing. If the fundamental tenet of the Protestant Reformation is read the Bible yourself and interpret it yourself, right? Mm-hmm. If the artists are doing that too, if they're reading the Bible story and not saying, well, you know, in the ideal world it would have looked like this, or it probably looked like this, they instead are doing, oh, I want it to look like this, so I'm going to make it look like this, then they too are guilty of the same thing that the church is concerned is happening with the Protestant Reformation. I often think of it as J.J. Abramsing the stories. You know, J.J. Abrams takes the Star Trek movies and then makes a whole new Star Trek that has nothing to do with the original. Yeah. That's kind of how I feel about these artists. They just like, oh, that's nice, I'll just do it completely differently. So yes, art really gets called. The church has to make a decision whether it's going to continue to sponsor art, and the church decides to sponsor art, but it does lay down guidelines for artists that they must follow.
888-31-TRUTH, the number. Elizabeth Lev, our guest, and we go now to Renato in San Bernardino, Paraguay. Oh, I'm sorry I made you wait. I didn't realize the call came from Paraguay, listening on the EWTN app. Renato, your question for Elizabeth Lev.
Hi, Sai, how are you? Good evening, and hi, Mrs. Elizabeth. Pleasure to meet you. I see Sai still got some remnants of the ashes on his forehead from Ash Wednesday. So happy Ash Wednesday to both of you. My question has to do with mainly with the depictions of Saint Joseph, because most of the pictures that I know of Saint Joseph depict him as an older man. Literally almost a grandfather-looking figure, which I do understand probably has to do with making people easier to believe that he was continent and keeping the virgin, of course. But then on the other hand, it also contradicts, the call to chastity that is required of everybody. And so my question is, was the idea of painting St. Joseph as an older man the idea of a painter, or did the clergy have passed instructions to the painters as how they wanted the characters to be painted?
Oh, fair enough. So, so how do we end up with an older St. Joseph in the paintings?
It's actually a really interesting question. Joseph, so let's start with Joseph takes a very long time to show up in art. So the problem begins with this. They don't really show Joseph until 430 AD. His first appearance is in the Triumphal Arch in St. Mary Major in mosaic. He's walking out of a house. He's wearing a short tunic with a little orange robe over his shoulder. He's represented as a younger man there. He looks sort of like he'd belong in the imperial court. And then Joseph begins to make his first little forays into art. Joseph actually in art has many, many different looks. If you look at the works of, for example, of Murillo, when he does the Holy Family, he does a youthful Saint Joseph. But in the Renaissance, they want to draw out, I think you're right, I think they do want to kind of emphasize the virginity of Mary, and they also want to draw out Joseph as the unlikely suitor. And so Joseph starts to look older, and sometimes, interestingly enough, he sort of begins to parallel with the kind of the white hair. He parallels that image of the Father, of God the Father, who in the Renaissance really only shows up as a little face and a white beard in sort of the upper corner of the Annunciation. So he begins to parallel also the idea of the Father and then Jesus's Father on earth. And then the other reason why Joseph is often shown as old is because Joseph will then become the patron of the art of dying well. So then images will start to proliferate where we see the death of St. Joseph. So we see him as an old man because they want to draw out the idea that at Joseph's deathbed, he was accompanied by both his son, Jesus, and Mary. And so it's sort of the perfect death.
Renato, I'm sorry that Elizabeth didn't know very much about Joseph, but was that does that help you? Does that? Yeah.
Yeah, the other half of the question was where the painter instructed as to what the St. Joseph and the other figures had to look like.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Okay, we're sorry, we're up against time here, Renato. So
okay, let me just make this very quickly. The painters don't really make a lot of decisions themselves until you get to about 1400. So the earlier depictions of Joseph are basically decided by a church tradition. Then about 1300, 1400, we see painters beginning to think for themselves, but generally, or to interpret things themselves. But generally, they keep to some kind of. There's usually a reason why they're doing it, which comes out of church tradition.
Renato, thanks very, very much for that call. 888-318-7884 is our number if you have a question about Catholic art, and particularly about how Catholic art saved the faith, because that is the title of Elizabeth Lev's brand new and very beautiful and not light book. It weighs, I don't know how many pounds. I don't know what the weight is, but you feel it in your hands when you pick it up. The subtitle is The Triumph of Beauty and Truth in Counter-Reformation Art. Again, your questions welcome. 888-318-7884. Right back with more right after this.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
The Catholic Church claims to be the religion in which the fullness of truth resides, but at times getting to the heart of any particular question of doctrine or morals can lead not only to personal confusion, but conflict and even disagreement among Catholics. In his new book, Teaching with Authority, Jimmy Akin sets the record straight. Teaching with Authority isn't about understanding specific teachings of the faith, but rather about understanding Catholic teaching itself. A unique, valuable, and long overdue resource for Catholics as well as those inquiring about the faith, Teaching with Authority will help deepen your understanding of what the Church teaches by showing you, maybe for the first time, how, why, and where it does. Get your copy of Teaching with Authority today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it is outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception, using scripture, papal and magisterial teaching, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine. Trent put forward a compelling case for Catholic teaching with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging onto the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Have you ever sown seeds of discord in your life?
We're discussing the impacts on tomorrow's Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
What is wrong with my good friend Debbie Georgiani? That's all I want. What is wrong with my good friend Debbie Georgiani? She does those little tags, and she treats me like I'm not her friend. My feelings are deeply hurt. 888-318-7884, the number here. We're talking art with Elizabeth Lev, who I have to tell you, I'm sorry that you couldn't get anybody good to blurb the book, like Bishop Robert Barron and Peggy Noonan and Cardinal Dolan and Newt Gingrich. But I do think there's you're hitting something. There's a way in which your work on art is doing work that people really want done. It has a quality of recovery to it, but it also has a quality of giving us some direction, which we badly, badly need. So I don't know. That's the flattery part of the show. Sorry, I don't even know where.
Thank you.
I don't know.
I'm getting.
I felt like there was a question going to come, and then I realized there's no question at the end of this. I think you're just.
I'm just basking.
Yeah. Well, but go ahead and bask, because it's a crisis, really, of art. I mean, I don't mean in sacred art and also in secular art. It's a crisis because of maybe, I don't know, we just don't understand art anymore. So I think that's why you're being so highly valued, is you're giving us that understanding again. John in Atlanta is next, listening on The Quest, one of my favorite Catholic radio stations in the world, The Quest in Atlanta, Georgia. Your question, John, for Elizabeth Lev.
Good evening, and let me continue the flattery. Dr. Lev, I'm a huge, huge fan, and I have your book, the new book, here in my hand as we speak.
It's heavy, right?
It is. It's remarkably heavy for its size, and
yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting into it. Dr. Lev, my question for you is in regards to Michelangelo. I have an art history minor. I studied in Florence. I've read several of books on Michelangelo, and it wasn't until Bishop Barron's Pivotal Players episode that talked about Michelangelo's profound faith that I was ever made aware that he even had such a thing as profound faith. And I understand, my education was in a secular university, but that's something that I have to admit was pretty new to me. Can you talk a little bit about Michelangelo's faith, how we don't know about it, and perhaps what are some good resources to learn more about it?
So I double whammy secular art history training. I had University of Chicago undergrad and then University of Bologna graduate, Bologna being, of course, the great communist city of Italy. Therefore, the idea of faith and Michelangelo was kept far apart in my studies. And it was something of a revelation to me to realize how much Michelangelo deeply cared about his faith and deeply cared about the issues of the faith of his day. He had a particularly strong Marian devotion, which now, after all these years, it's kind of like a duh. If his first work was a Pietà, duh. But he really, his devotion to Mary, which continues throughout his life, really shapes the way he views her, which is very, very unique. So that's first of all, one aspect of just understanding Michelangelo is just look at these images of Mary that are completely different from the way other people represent her, and you realize this is a man who has a very strong relationship with this woman. He doesn't just put her in the usual box that everybody else does. But I think more to your question. I actually, when you're asking your question, I had a little thought. There's a wonderful little story about Michelangelo because in the Protestant Reformation, many people believed that he was some sort of crypto-Protestant. I often tell people the oldest heresy about Michelangelo, that he was secretly a Protestant. But since today is Ash Wednesday for you, and yesterday was Carnival, that's when the Seven Churches Walk was begun by St. Philip Neri. So St. Philip Neri, super counter-Reformation saint, invents this idea of something to do on the eve of Ash Wednesday. Michelangelo actually went and did the Seven Churches Walk. This man was born in 1475. He does this walk when he's 75. He gets a special permission from the Pope in order to be able to ride a donkey because he's too old to do all the walking. And he also gets special permission to get an indulgence, not just for himself, but for somebody else. So that, to me, that's always a sign that he's totally with the program. He was also, just in case you weren't aware of this, a Third Order Franciscan. So he's actually buried in the Church of Santa Croce in a Franciscan's habit. So deeply, his faith marked his entire work.
John.
I did not know that he was a Third Order Franciscan. I've been to his tomb at Santa Croce, but I was completely unaware that he was a Franciscan. Are there any books or resources that get into his spirituality and faith, or is that something still to be written by you?
The pieces that I put together, they come from many different books. You could actually take a little bit of a look at some of his later poetry. The poetry in his later years really begins to talk about his state of his soul, his idea of his faith. It becomes much, much, much more evident in the final years.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thanks very, very much. Let us go to Malcolm in Washington State. Malcolm, you're next. Your question for Elizabeth Lev.
Hey, first off, that'll be an interesting read because there's big claims, of course, about Michelangelo being gay from the Latino days. But anyway, I'm a little perplexed about the Counter-Reformation art kind of. I know, you've got Calvinist demolition, which was not true for of course, the Lutherans and all those other folk. So it's not like there was a necessarily imposition of sudden bad art, and guys like Michelangelo were borrowing heavily from the classical art you see in Rome and elsewhere, and just with all the movements in art over the century, I'm a little perplexed as far as how this, in a sense, saved the faith, even from a secular standpoint. You can tell I've got an art background. I mean, you look at the movements of art over the years, and talk about shows lined up around the block. Look at the National Gallery and the Van Gogh show, and Van Gogh is no classicist by any means, but you go through the eras of the great Romanticists. Even when you get into Dadaism, there's popularity in that. That's more modern, of course, but art has been so flexible and still so popular in so many different forms over the centuries. I'm just having a hard time pinning down how this is some sort of special revolution.
So, Elizabeth Lev, how dare you say Counter-Reformation art saved the faith? There's the challenge.
Basically, let's just throw in your little Van Gogh. Van Gogh's art, and what makes him so fascinating is his intense struggle with faith. If you delve into his life, you'll find his entire life is really fighting the question of trying to reject his faith. So even though he's not a Catholic, that's part of what resonates in his work. But more to the point, art. In the period of the Counter-Reformation, there was a need to transmit the truth of the tradition of the faith, the fundamental tenets of the faith, and to persuade people that the faith is something valuable. And so that is visual arts are a very effective means of doing so. We are convinced of things through movies and television. People have been convinced of all kinds of sociological ideas thanks to TV shows that they watch or series that they fall in love with. So yes, art can actually influence people, teach them, and change their minds. So the Counter-Reformation art, which marshaled the strength of color, line, narrative, storytelling, genius of these people to focus it on teaching clearly, beautifully, attractively presenting the tenets of the faith, the presence of the saints. It is actually a way of helping people who have lost a sense of a tangibility. They're filled with faith choices. Think about what happens in 1500. All of a sudden you find yourself with a bazillion choices. There's a new religion starting every day, and it's hard to navigate which religion you're supposed to be focused on. And the Catholic Church paints a picture for you that says, this is Mary, this is Jesus, this has been around for 1,500 years, this is where you want to be. So I think it's a very, very powerful thing. Insofar as your discussion regarding Michelangelo's use of ancient art, Michelangelo takes ancient art and he reuses it. He doesn't copy them. He really teaches ancient art to speak Christian. So it's not a question. Art is, of course, flexible, and because of its flexibility, art can continue to change and morph so it can talk to different generations, draw on past beauty to talk to contemporary issues. So I don't think art's flexibility is a weakness. It's a strength in the faith.
Malcolm, thanks very much. When you're talking there and making the description you're making, I am thinking in my mind, and you tell me if I'm off, what's striking me about what you're saying is we have seen in our own lifetime television shows transform our understanding, for example, of marriage. And
yes.
and so and in a very short period of time, in a period of a decade, 2 decades, an utter transformation of our and so I appreciate the analogy because television maybe does for us now what these works of art did in their day.
I was exactly thinking of that particular question. How radically our understanding of marriage, specifically marriage, has changed because we watch television shows that sit in our living room, become part of our daily lives. The same way the painting in the chapel where you go to pray every day, because it wasn't just 1 hour a week, these churches. They're open here in this wonderful country, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., except for those that have siesta. You are in there. It's your refuge from the rain, from the cold. It's a place to stop. It's a place to collect. So these works of art became as familiar to you as these television characters have become to us. And so they become very persuasive. So yes, it was exactly what I was thinking of.
Again, Malcolm, thank you very, very much for the call. Lots of calls to get to, so we better take a quick break, and then we will come back to those calls. I want to remind you again, we've got a free ebook for you. Go to Catholic Answers Facebook page, and you can download, just by clicking on a little tile there, Making the Most of Lent, a Spiritual Companion. That's a free ebook to walk with you through Lent on the Catholic Answers Facebook page right now.
We're glad you're with us. Stick around for more Catholic Answers Live.
Listeners to Catholic radio, I think, benefit most, at least initially, from what I call remedial catechesis. What Catholic radio does is it becomes an echo chamber for the teaching authority of the Catholic Church. And what we're doing is teaching many things which have been neglected over the last 40, 50 years. If you listen to Catholic radio, you know what the Catholic Church teaches.
Al Cresta thinks Catholic radio is important. So should you.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their Catholic values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're talking art. As a matter of fact, Counter-Reformation Catholic Art, the triumph of beauty and truth in Counter-Reformation art is the subtitle of Elizabeth Lev's really, I'm going to go out and say, magnificent new book, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith. And you can tell by listening to her this hour that she knows her stuff, and she'll help you understand how to fit all this into the history of into salvation history and into the secular history of the world. I was mentioning to you at the break, much to my shame, I've never been to Roma, your home there, the Eternal City, the Caput Mundi. I know all the names for it, but I've never been there. Okay, so we're going to go on, pilgrimage there in November. Of course, you know, there's the things that you're going to see that you just have to see there. But maybe you, as an art historian, can tell me what's something that maybe people don't know to visit, or an artist they don't know to be prepared to see when they come for Rome. You want to give me any suggestions? And I can't pay for this. This is going to have to be free advice from you?
Well, in my mind today, because today started as Ash Wednesday, one of the most wonderful traditions, the most beautiful things we do in Rome is we go to Santa Sabina. It's the station church for Ash Wednesday. And this church sits on the top of the Aventine Hill. It's one of the most perfect Christian churches. It's built in 430, and it's the crystallization of a perfect Christian church. And in the front of that church, in wooden doors that date back to 430. On the highest door on the upper left-hand side is the earliest image of the crucifixion in the world. So I just trying to think of something. There are a million things in this city, but I was just there this morning, and I was just thinking about how incredibly beautiful that church. It's very simple. It doesn't have the accretions of all the beautiful stuff. It's very simple, elegant, and then it has this amazing image.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Pretty soon I'm going to be a cultured person. If I just keep at it, pretty soon I'm going to be a cultured person. John,
we could do this once a week if you like.
Yeah, you think? I think it might take more than that. I think I might need a more intense program to become cultured. First of all, I want to get to John Portland. We're coming to you, but off air, Keith in Cheyenne, Wyoming, asked this and then wasn't able to stay. He tells us his favorite artist is El Greco, and he wants to know what you think of El Greco. I think he wants approval.
Well, first of all, if your favorite artist is El Greco, then great for you, because you have been out there looking at art. He's not the first person who pops up.
Yeah.
His art is extremely edgy, so that shows it's a very interesting taste on your part. El Greco is a fascinating artist. He's one of the early artists who moves from what we call mannerist. So this is the very elongated, almost a little bit clever in his design. His use of color is very artificial, but at the same time, he tries very hard. He's doing these things very hard to evoke very strong emotion. However, I personally, because I am such a huge Michelangelo fan, I'm still mad at El Greco because he showed up in Rome, and when people were talking about the nudity in the Last Judgment, El Greco said that if they wanted to scrape it off the wall, he could paint it again and paint it better. So I'm still a little irritated about that. But outside of that, he's a great guy.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, okay, fair enough. Really? If you think you can paint it better than Michelangelo, you are not lacking in pride of life. John in Portland, Oregon, thanks for waiting. John's listening on Modern Day Radio. You just can't do better than Modern Day Radio. John, your question for Elizabeth Lev.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about how some of the art that is being seen today, religious art, has kind of been dumbed down compared to what it was 400, 500 years ago, that it's something that just kind of appeals to the masses. And I wondered if you kind of feel the same way when it comes to the lack of true sacred music that we're seeing in so many of our churches. You know, you have a 1,000-year canon of classical music written for the church, early choral polyphony, great pipe organ music, and so much of this is not being heard anymore, and I feel it's part of what makes us different from some of the other Protestant megachurches that are just a rock concert and a sermon, and that it actually draws us in. We, as a church, are the caretakers of great architecture, great art, and great music, and it seems like so much of that has been lost in only a few short decades.
You said it, brother. Elizabeth Lev.
So I'm sorry if I gave the impression that I think that art has been dumbed down and cheapened for the masses. I actually am concerned that art doesn't speak to the masses. My usual issue with art is that I feel that modern day art is so busy discussing some esoteric thing that nobody can understand, that art has really kind of left behind the people it's supposed to be serving. So usually my argument with modern day, it's just an aside, I feel like I might have given the wrong impression there. But insofar as music is concerned, music was so important that music was dealt with before art by the church during the Counter-Reformation. There were similar problems happening in music as were happening with art, meaning that religious music was becoming exactly what you were saying. It was becoming pop songs, rock concerts. They were writing pieces of music that were supposed to be more fun for people, so they would enjoy going to mass more. But they couldn't understand the words. They didn't care about the words. It wasn't a form of prayer. And so in 1555, Pierluigi Palestrina, which I'm sure you know, wrote the Missa Papa Marcelle for Pope Marcellus II, who was fortunately alive during those 30 days in order to be able to approve sacred music. And as a matter of fact, sacred music pulled out of the tailspin that art was falling into in the 16th century long before painting did. So yes, music is, and of course Pope Benedict XVI, who spoke so eloquently about the importance of music. I think in many ways when he spoke about how beauty wounds and how art opens this wound in us that allows the beautiful to get in, that allows truth to enter us. I think more than anything else, Pope Benedict XVI tended to be thinking about music because for him that was, I think, the most beautiful art form. So absolutely.
John, your response.
Yeah, and I appreciate the historical context there, but am I understanding you correctly that we should actually be bringing back a lot of this great music that has been lost? I mean, it's so tragic that there are these great churches, even here in the Portland area, some of them have wonderful pipe organs, and they're just never used at all, or we don't hear as much of the early choral polyphony and the chant as we should. Thankfully, our Archbishop is bringing some of it back. But
is that Archbishop Sample? Is he your Archbishop?
Yes.
He's the Archbishop.
Yeah. Oh yes. You're in better road towards beauty than most others. Your Archbishop, he's going to lead that charge.
With your permission, Elizabeth Lev, I will make two suggestions to John. One, find out about the Benedict XVI Institute for sacred music and for divine worship. Archbishop Corleone started that in San Francisco, and they're doing magnificent things there. The other, a composer I will just propose to you, Frank LaRocca, American composer doing magnificent church music. And I got to do an interview with him, so I got to do that big fan interview, like I'm getting to do with Elizabeth Lev today. So you can find that on Catholic Answers Focus. Thanks very much for that. But I want to, he puts me in a mind of a question I'd like to ask you, Liz. When I talked with Frank LaRocca, who has written just magnificent contemporary music for the church, including the new Mass of the Americas. Part of what he points out is you want to draw on these classical sources and not just be a pastiche of these classical sources, that we have to do it for our times. I wonder if that's a problem with church painting, for example. Now that you've had Michelangelo, now that you've had Caravaggio, how does a contemporary painter incorporate all the things that have happened since then and not just be an homage, not just be a pastiche of Caravaggio or Michelangelo?
I think it's Michelangelo himself, as we were saying earlier in one of the earlier questions, was it Malcolm? Michelangelo himself drew on ancient sources because after the Greeks were done perfecting the human body, what do you do next? But Michelangelo found a way to take those beautiful bodies of the Greek sculptures and turn them into something that would speak to the Christian world. So part of what makes a masterpiece, as Kenneth Clark said many years ago, is when the artist draws on the past and then reinterprets it for the age that he's living in. The thing that's coming into my head right now, since we keep talking about West Coast examples, is, for example, the tapestries by John Nava in the Los Angeles Cathedral, which it's an ancient art. Tapestry is an ancient art. It's been done a million times. On top of that, it's very limited art. But he between the technique, the technology, and the idea he picked up the ancient idea of the saints kind of processing, that he goes all the way back to like the Basilica Santa Apollinare in Ravenna, but he did it with these new faces. He did it with this brilliant technique. So it's really there has to be a better sense. I think one of the things that keeps coming back in this conversation is also the question of architecture. If you're making churches and you want to make decoration or music for churches, first you have to have an understanding of what the church is there to do. It makes it easier for the artist to understand how he complements what the architecture is to do, and it makes it easier for the composer to understand how he's supposed to fill that space.
I appreciate that, because I have, just having seen those tapestries. As a matter of fact, we have a John Nava tapestry in our parish at
wow.
Yeah, or a copy of, I don't know what it is, but it's a lovely thing. I see what you're saying. It is actually the most beautiful thing about that Los Angeles cathedral, and I'll leave that there. But okay, so there are people who are doing this, who are taking the classical techniques and traditions and applying new techniques and making this a contemporary re-expression of what's really beautiful for the church.
It feels like a lot of artists feel so frustrated that they've moved off into more abstraction and things that are these kind of playing around with medium. But really, you can tell stories in new ways.
Well, that'll be the next book then, maybe. You'll tell us all about all the contemporary people doing this beautiful stuff. The book, How Catholic Art Saved the Faith, The Triumph of Beauty and Truth in Counter-Reformation Art. The author is Elizabeth Lev, who has been our guest this hour. It has, for me, been a delight. Thank you very, very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Tomorrow will be open forum 2 hours, but guess what? It's going to be an internet open forum. So all those internet questions that have come in and we haven't had a chance to answer them, we're going to answer them tomorrow. As a matter of fact, we are going to wear out the internet. Jimmy Aiken will be our guest both hours. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.